be free for everyone to join. We do these every year, and basically what they are is just a nice way of introducing interviews to you guys and giving you some top tips. So we'll get right into it if that's fine. Just before we begin, I've got this QR code for you guys to join if you want to join future webinars like this or get some tips about medical interviews and dental interviews. This is a WhatsApp group chat that we basically sort of keep in touch with our students for. Everyone can join this one. So if you scan this QR code, you should be able to join. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes just to scan that, if that's all right. If you can't see that on your screen, just mention it in the chat, but you all should be able to see it. Sam, can you see it?
Yeah, it's working.
All right, fantastic. So just scan it. It should let you join a WhatsApp group chat, and I'll put a link in. Oh, did I cut out then?
I think that was you, yes.
Yes, that was my connection there. Sorry for that. I'm not sure what happened. Some are saying that it's reached the limit on the group, so I'm just going to send another link in the Zoom chat, if that's fine. So anyone who wants to join the group chat, there'll be a link in the Zoom chat for you to just click on. So that's been sent there. I'll put another QR code in a moment if you wish to join that. But anyways, let's get started if that's fine. So all you can join this Menti. If you wish to join, you just have to click on this link above or just put menti.com on your phone or your laptop and put this code in. Just out of interest, where has everyone applied? If you want to just put it in your Zoom chat as well, you can put it there if you want or on the Menti. Sam, do you remember where you applied when you were applying for medical school?
Oh gosh. Well, I think it was Birmingham, Cardiff, Bristol. Can't remember the last one actually. How about you?
Yeah, a good question. So I applied twice actually. The first time around, I kind of just picked my universities out of a hat and didn't really know where to go with. I can't remember the first time, to be fair. The only one I remember was Plymouth because that's the only one I got the interview from. A lot has changed since then, but the second time around, I applied to Hull, York, Exeter, Plymouth, and Leeds. That time around, I was successful. I think Sam, you go to Birmingham, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm at Birmingham, final year. Where did you go, Ashir?
I go to Hull in York Medical School. So yeah, so that's. I mean, I see Hull York there. I also do. You see Birmingham?
Not many Birmingham. Oh dear, not very popular.
Yeah, they are very strict on their entry requirements, aren't they? So it's a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit
a new
tough.
thing since they increased the widening participation. But yeah, no, not many in the chat.
Yeah. Anyways, interesting to see. One thing I would like to mention here, Sam, what do you think about like the interviews? I think, to be honest, a lot of people get really worried that they're going to be drastically different. But I feel like a lot of the fundamental concepts are quite similar. What about you?
I couldn't agree more. I've taught people from more or less, every application now. And I'm not going to lie, the content is very, very similar across the board. The only ones that are a bit different are sort of the Oxbridge. Most places have a goofy station or two that's unique to them, but the core content is more or less the same everywhere.
Exactly. I think one key thing that I wanted to mention to the students today is that whichever university you apply to, do not get bogged down about, oh, it's going to be drastically different. When we say MMI, multiple mini interview, it's just a fancy structure. The questions you're going to get are quite similar to panel. It's just an OSCE style. I like to say like they have maybe multiple rooms with several stations with different topics, but the topics you're going to get are quite similar. So your answers should not, in theory, drastically change. Um, but yes, like Oxford and Cambridge, they do focus on a little bit of biomedical knowledge too, which we'll come back to in a moment. So yeah,
Mm. Yeah, and just for anyone wondering, OSCEs are the type of exams that we sit as medical students, as sort of the practical. So these MMIs are kind of based off what you will be doing anyway for some of your exams in medical school. That's why they are a bit unusual and a bit different to what other places do for other courses.
yeah, and the thing is with this image that I'm showing over here, this is a typical type of MMI scenario. They tend to have one interviewer and they tend to stick to a certain topic. They may ask more than one question, but it seems like it's like an OSCE. The way you approach these stations in an actual interview is very similar to what you would be doing in an OSCE as well. So it's quite a pressured environment compared to a panel. But there are advantages and disadvantages as well, but we'll come back to that in a second. Anyways, we'll move on to the next bit. Oh, I think I went too far. So ignore the BMAT on this timeline. We all know the BMAT's gone, but right now you guys are basically at the final stages. So this is the last hurdle for you guys. Hopefully most of you will get interviews. And if you manage to perform well at your interviews, most universities will give you an offer. And that will mean you need to get these A-level grades. And if you're successful, then you get a place. If you are on a gap year, you've already got your A-levels, it'll just be an unconditional offer. So that's a very quick one. Move on to the next bit here. So Sam, do you want to tell the students a bit more about when they can specifically sort of think about their interviews, when they're going to get them?
Yeah. So I think most people, if you've got a very, very good UCAT score, good GCSEs, all of that, you've ticked all the boxes. Probably the earliest you can expect, I would say, is 3 weeks' time. It's normally late November that they start, and I wouldn't be worried if you hadn't heard back for November, December. At the latest, it's the sort of the beginning of the year where you would hope to hear back from medical schools. But most of the time, so you guys will start hearing late November, December time. Maybe if you're lucky, you might be able to schedule in some interviews before Christmas, but unless you're doing Oxbridge, that's unlikely. Most of the interviews will be in January, February time. But hopefully, most of you guys should hear back at least one or two interview offers by Christmas, I would say.
And typically for Oxford and Cambridge, you can find a lot of this information about which universities are giving out which interviews at what time. If you just go onto their website, they typically do advertise their stuff. I think Cambridge have said in the first 3 weeks of December, and Oxford have also published their exact timelines as well. So if you're a bit unsure, just check. And Sam, what advice would you give to students about starting? Like, do you think they should get started now?
So I think for most people, interviewing is very sort of cram rewarding, I would say. I would normally say it's good to really cram for a month prior to your interviews. And before that, it's a good idea to do a little bit, sort of maybe once or twice a week. Try and get those talking skills up. Try and start learning some of the ethics content, some of the sort of medical specific content that you're likely to be asked about. So sort of slow and steady, sort of at this time period of the year, and then start to ramp it up a little bit before the month before your interviews, I would say.
Precisely, yeah. So now is the time to basically start building some of your answers. We're going to go through a bit of example scenarios that you can get and what me and Sam did and what advice we would give you. So, I'll tell you what I did the first time that didn't lead to any interviews and I mean successful interviews, and what happened the second time around when I did prepare well. The first time around, I left it very last minute. I was under the assumption that I would get no interviews whatsoever. And when I thought this, I basically didn't prepare at all. I left it to the last sort of week or so until I got an invite. I thought, what's the point in me in preparing if I'm not going to get any interviews? So if any of you have scored lower on the UCAT or a little bit skeptical, you won't get interviews, my advice would be just start anyways, because if your end goal is medicine or dentistry and you're just going to reapply, if you don't practice this year and you reapply next year, you're at a slight disadvantage as well. There may be some gap year students who are prepared the year before and have a slight more advantage than you. You're not going to lose these skills. You're not going to sort of forget any of the content you learned. So even if you have low chances of getting an interview, do prepare and do as much practice as you can. Because when you get the interview invite, it's like a sudden invite that they give to you, and you only have like a week or two to prepare. So the best idea is start preparing early, try and do as many mocks as you can, get help from your family and friends even. You don't always need somebody who's in medicine to assess you. You can just give them the stations if you have any resources and just practice. The confidence is key for these interviews. So I would start around now, start making some of your answers, start looking at some of the sort of the practice questions you can. Right, so looking at common topics, I've referred a lot to about what kind of questions you can get on an interview, and they're fundamentally the same at most universities. Sam, which ones do you think are the most important for students to start learning now?
So I think right now the best thing for you guys to start thinking about are the questions that are really easy to prepare, the classic questions, the ones that you can basically guarantee are going to be asked in some form or another. The most obvious classic one that I always start with my both my one-to-one pupils and the classes that I teach is why medicine? It's the easiest, it's the most obvious, it's the one that you can rehearse the most. And obviously we don't want to sound too rehearsed and we don't want to sound too cliche, but start with the easy things is what I would say. And these are your classic questions. Why do you want to study medicine? Why do you want to study it here? Why is teamwork important? All of that kind of stuff.
I definitely agree with that. Motivation to medicine, you're going to be asked that no matter where you go. There are some universities that will ask different types of questions like ethics, so they might ask you questions on your personality, or sometimes might even ask about role plays and group scenarios. But you're going to be asked motivation for medicine pretty much. I can't think of a single university I wasn't asked why I want, well, they didn't ask me why I want to do medicine. They all pretty much asked that question. I always got questions about my personality at times. With work experience, though that question is often not directly asked, I found personally that what did you learn from your work experience? You often have to volunteer it when they're asking about your skills. What about you, Sam? Did you ever get asked that question about your work experience?
Yeah, I mean, so work experience again, quite a common station, definitely one that we want to prepare for. Work experience is a good thing to have in the back of your mind as well, because whatever the station that you're on, so even motivation for medicine, for example, why do you want to study medicine? Well, I saw XYZ on my work experience and I really enjoyed that, thought it was fascinating, thought it was stimulating, all of that. I couldn't agree more with Ashir that work experience, not just work experience specific stations, but also stations which are not directly about work experience. It's invaluable if you can stick it in there, have some good reflections from your work experience, read over some notes that hopefully you guys made when you were on your work experience, etc., etc.
Exactly. Yeah. And what Sam said before is you don't want to rehearse these questions. Like, don't think of paragraphs and memorize them. It's quite easy for interviewers to notice when you do that sort of thing. And if they ask you a question that might be slightly something you haven't prepared for, it'll be hard for you to sort of use your knowledge. So try and understand what they're looking for. Try and make some bullet points that you can transfer over to other questions. So the question like why medicine, there's lots of things that you can bring up in there that can also relate to in your work experience, can also relate to your personality. There's obviously some common medical knowledge like medical ethics, NHS hot topics, and NHS structure that you guys need to know about. And in some of the later webinars, we will touch on those. So you need to know about certain ethical guidelines, and you can actually go on the GMC's website to go and read about them. I would suggest you guys doing that from now. The more you understand those concepts and get a bit of an idea about them, the better you can tackle those stations. And they often are, for some people, the harder stations. So just to summarize, motivation for medicine, work experience, personality questions. You've got questions on ethics, NHS hot topics, NHS structure, and some miscellaneous ones like data interpretation, role play, and group scenarios. But they're all related. So based on that, I think this question's a little bit. I probably. What about you, Sam? I think we should skip over this one because we basically gave the
Yeah.
answers to students here, right? So we'll skip over
Yeah.
it if that's fine. Let's go on this question. So for this one, I think because it's the first question, I'm going to be the examiner and Sam's going to be basically the student that's going to answer it. We're not going to do the reading time because Sam's an expert and he can answer these quite well. So this is just an example of what would happen. So typically what's going to happen in an MMI scenario, bell will ring, you'll be stood outside a room, you'll have to walk in and I will be sat there or somebody else will be sat there as an examiner. You sit down and then another bell rings to say that you started the station. So we're going to start the station. I'll read it out to Sam. So what inspired you to want to become a doctor? Tell me about a patient that you saw during your work experience or volunteering who inspired you to find out more about what was wrong with them. Whenever you're ready, Sam.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I'm going to mention before I begin, guys. So first things first, whenever you walk into this, it's a bit artificial in a Zoom environment like this, but always remember to introduce yourself. Always say hi, good morning, partly because it's friendly, it's polite, but also partly because they need your name. So when we mark you, and in some universities, Birmingham included, we medical students are actually part of the admissions process. When we're marking you, we need your name. So not only does it make our life much easier when we don't have to ask you, it just makes life a bit more friendly. And then the other thing is structure. So I would say everyone gets very caught up on the content, but I think equally important is actually like how you come across. Make our lives easy. Structure your answer as well as you can. Make it as obvious as to us as possible what you're saying and in what order you're going to say it. But now, yes, I'll just start with this. So, good morning. My name is Sam. Good afternoon, even. And thank you so much for taking the time to interview me today, Ashir. So, in response to your first question, what inspired me to want to become a doctor? During my work experience, I observed quite a lot of aspects of the job, which I thought really resonated with me. I started work experience because, well, to be honest, I enjoyed science. I enjoyed helping people. And I know that's quite a generic answer, which is why I decided to do some work experience to get an idea of something deeper, something more fundamental that might resonate with me with this career. So I'm going to make 3 points as to why I would like to become a doctor. First of all, it's a very holistic career option. You can get involved with lots of different things. You can use your technical knowledge, which is very academic and very in depth, alongside your empathy, communication skills, teamwork skills. And I think this is going to be a very stimulating career for me all round, considering the fact that on my work experience, I saw consultants engaging with multiple different members of the multidisciplinary team, having to use all parts of their brain to talk with patients, staff, and whilst at the same time recalling all their medical knowledge. I just thought that this seemed like an incredibly stimulating and interesting thing to be able to do for the rest of my life. My second point would be regarding specialization and opportunity within medicine. It's an incredibly varied career. Furthermore, I think that, there's career options outside of the obvious things that you do within medicine, such as teaching, leadership, research, management, all these things that really make medicine stand out to me. I have a broad range of interests. This is obvious due to my extracurricular pursuits outside of school. So I get involved with my Gold DofE expedition group with school, and I also play for badminton for county at county level outside of school as well. I would think medicine will do a very good job of keeping me interested in a broad range of areas because there's just so many different paths and opportunities. And my final point, I think I really enjoy work where I can see a tangible result. And in medicine, when you are, treating and helping people, you can really notice at the end of a day's work, I have made a difference today. I've made a difference to my community. I've made a difference to these individuals. I've made a difference in my workplace. I'm building towards a positive work experience, a positive workplace environment, and I am making the community a better place. I feel that I am able to see my patients do better, and I feel that they will go out into the community. There will be an increase in doctor-patient trust, and that overall, I can say that I've helped the community economically, spiritually, physically, and physiologically, which again ties into that holistic nature of the career, which I mentioned earlier. And then regarding a patient that I've seen on my work experience, yes. So I encountered an elderly gentleman when I was volunteering in a hospital who'd unfortunately had a stroke. He had a very interesting story to tell me. So he was unfortunately quite bored in hospital. He wasn't. He was sort of in a side room, and he doesn't. His relatives lived quite far away. So during my volunteering, I had a bit of spare time. I decided to have a chat with the gentleman. I realized that when you're dealing with such a varied career as medicine, you're going to be talking with a very large array of people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds. There's an incredible diversity to the career. This patient I saw had a very interesting life story. He was quite an elderly gentleman, as I say. He had been fighting in the Second World War, and it was clear to me that, from what the doctor said to me later on when I inquired about the patient, that this patient was probably for palliative care, for end of life care. But this gentleman was still fairly lucid at this time when I discussed with him. And it just really opened my eyes to the incredible number of people that you're going to see, as well as the incredible variation of conditions during my volunteering. So this was on a stroke ward in the hospital. I saw all kinds of different patients, some of whom seemed to be much less lucid than this gentleman, some of whom appeared to be much more lucid. You could tell which parts of the brain had been affected because of the strokes. This really interested me. The doctors told me a bit about this, and I decided to pursue a MOOC in neuroanatomy to try and learn a little bit more about this. And this was one of those patients who really inspired me to look into this, because to me, this gentleman seemed very, very well, and I didn't really understand why he might be in palliative care. But when the doctors told me a bit more, and when I understood from this MOOC that I did, a bit about the neuroanatomy that was going on, I realized, combined with his advanced age, that this was probably an end of life course. I found this whole experience very interesting, both talking to the patient, finding out more about the condition, and interacting with my colleagues to try and provide the best care possible during my volunteering work. All in all, it was just an incredible experience and really inspired me to, pursue this career and see patients like this gentleman. Thank you for your time, Ashir.
Brilliant. Yeah, so that before I go into my thoughts about that, Hannah has made a very interesting comment, so I agree, Hannah. But can we all just sort of take a minute to just think, just give me some points about what you liked about Sam's answer, or maybe what you didn't like in the Zoom chat. And what we can do is we could just talk about those, because that what Sam has given there is almost like a model response to this question. And in terms of the work experience question, you want to bring up multiple points like Sam did. And personal experience is quite good as well. I know not everybody has work experience necessarily, and we'll talk a little bit about what you need to do in that situation there. But somebody has said showed linkage and reflection. I think that was one of the main strong points about Sam's answer here, is reflecting on his experiences and also talking about specific key sort of responsibilities doctors have and things that interested him about that. When you relate to that and you bring up those points, and reflection is the key thing, that's when the examiner is ticking all those boxes. Sam, when I'm talking about reflection, could you just elaborate to the students what we mean by reflection, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. So reflection, so I think the thing is with most of these questions, some people will just feel the temptation to list off rattle off like a mini CV almost, like, say all these things that I've done. Cool, you've done 10 amazing things, but maybe you just got lucky. Maybe your dad was a doctor. I mean, a lot of medics have parents who are in the business, and people know that. And so it's less about, what you have done, although a bit of that is important. It's much more, what did you learn? You could stick if you've done some work experience, you could stick, more or less anyone in that work experience situation. Yeah, you got lucky. You probably pulled some strings or talked to the right people in order to get into the work experience. But what did you actually learn? What separates you out from somebody else who did the exact same work experience? That's the question. And reflection is about, what did you learn? What extra things did you do after whatever you did? Why do you think this is relevant and important to why you're here today, the interview? Link it all together. The more you link, the better.
Yeah. So somebody has asked a really interesting question here, Sharon. So do answers typically have to be of this length to get you a good score in the station? I would say it's not specific. You don't have to have a certain length. But the questions that Sam said about reflection is the main important thing. And when you don't have, let's say, if you haven't been into hospital, if you haven't been in a GP center and seen any patient interactions, which is quite normal, a lot of students don't actually do that. And what you want to do is reflect on something perhaps which is, it says all volunteering over here. You could pick out something where you're volunteering for some charity work, for example, where you need the same skills as a doctor would require. So if you think about the skills of a doctor, the six main ones, the 6 Cs, I'm not sure if you remember these ones, Sam. I don't remember the 6 Cs, but the main ones are like care, compassion, communication. You've got different skills that a doctor requires. Any career that you can find, or any opportunities that you can find where you can volunteer and show those same skills or practice them, that's where you can reflect on it. One thing is that your answer needs to be multifaceted. So there's multiple reasons why you want to become a doctor. Yes, work experience does solidify that through seeing patients, maybe building your interest for something like neuroanatomy. But also that you are not just a doctor, you're a teacher, you have to often manage things. You also have to sometimes even go into research. Perhaps some doctors contribute a huge amount to medicine in general, just by providing research. But other than that, you also have other key tasks, like, let's say if you become a consultant, you have to teach medical students. Even if you're like F3, if you're a CTF or clinical teaching fellow, you're still teaching medical students at times. So the important part is that you're touching all those different aspects. You're showing why it's important for you to become a doctor, why it inspires you to become a doctor. Because yes, I want to teach, I also want to manage, but why is that important? What skills do I have to show them? Where have I seen that? Where have I displayed that myself? Those are the main answers. Anything else you wanted to add, Sam?
Yeah, just I mean, we'll do, guys. We'll mainly answer your questions at the end. But there's a lot of lovely comments. Thank you so much for your comments in terms of what could be done better. So I've seen a few things. First of all, yes, I don't think I talked for the full 8 minutes there. This is partly because we don't have a clock on us right now. To be
Yeah.
honest, I don't think Ashir was timing me. Maybe he was. I'm not sure. Don't worry too much about that. So in all honesty, I think that's quite most 8 minute stations will probably have a few more questions than that. Most stations will have two or three, maybe four if it's an 8 minute station, sort of sub questions within the theme. But you're right. I don't think I spoke for a full 8 minutes there.
Yeah.
Not actually sure what I did. You can always add more points. I wasn't. I must admit, I didn't have a clock on me. You normally will have some sort of clock that you can look at when you are answering these questions. And then the other little critique that I see here is someone saying I said a few times. No worries if you say a few ums, a few yeahs, a few that kind of thing. It kind of depends. If you're saying them all the time, hopefully I wasn't saying it too much. We'll see in the recording, I guess. But if
Yeah.
you say it a few times, that's okay. It's fine, especially if it's only for a second or two. They understand you're nervous. They understand that it's a big day for you. It's okay to have a few pauses and a few ums. If you think you've hit a bit of a wall, and maybe you realize, oh God, I don't know what I'm going to say, and you realize it's going to take you at least 10 seconds to figure something out, a good thing to say is something like, excuse me one moment, give me a moment just to rearrange my thoughts just so that I can continue answering this question. Something like that. Let the examiner know that you haven't completely frozen, that you've got some ideas, you just need to structure them. That's what I would say. I think that's all the critique that I can see at the moment. If there's any more critiques, we can address them at the end.
To be very perfectly honest with you, I did not notice the ums as much. I think when you are focusing on the answer and the answer is quite coherent, it sticks to the main points. The examiner is not going to notice most of the ums. I think when
Completely.
you're saying too much, it shows a lack of confidence, a lack of preparation. That's when they will notice it. So there may be some particularly fussy examiners out there, and I don't deny that. There are people who will notice it a bit more. But I think more importantly is the content of your answer that'll be more important. And about the 8 minutes as well. The 8 minutes, there are two. I took a screenshot of our normal question bank here for you guys. So there are two further questions after this. So this would typically be a 2 or 3 minute answer response, which is what I think Sam stuck to. So that I typically, for work experience, this question, mine was about 3 or 4 minutes long. There were some interviews where I kept it a little bit shorter if I had less time. Anyways, just before I move on to the next bit, if you guys are interested in doing some simulation of MMIs, I know some schools also do this. We run something called an MMI circuit. I think, Sam, you are an examiner in some of them, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So if you would like to participate in that, it's a very good event. We have 3 different circuits. We call it A, B, and C. They're just different topics. We have multiple dates. They are in person. They are online. If you're interested in booking them, for the interview season, we have a sort of a special offer this year. So if you wanted to book them, you get 10% off for all 3 of them. You can just scan the QR code on the next one. You do about 10 stations and you observe about 10 as well. There are lots of dates and we run this every weekend pretty much. So you can join whenever you want. And it's throughout from October, November, December, January, and February. There is lots of opportunities. And if you were struggling to get that practice and you wanted a mock, you can go ahead and do that. We do have university-specific stations on this as well. Pragati, the website does say what kind of stations there are, but just so that, you know, when you actually book it, you will get the exact sort of stations, etc. We tend to cover a lot of the topics that you can get. So if you do all 3, you're not going to miss out anything. Some people are posting some very interesting questions, which we'll come back to at the end if that's fine. But I'll leave this QR code for you guys there, and at the end I'll put a link as well. Anyways, move on to the next bit. Great. So there are sometimes university-specific questions that you get. For example, I was asked why Plymouth or why Holyoke Medical School. I think, Sam, were you asked at Birmingham perhaps? Why Birmingham as well? Like,
I don't think Birmingham did, but Cardiff are very interesting because Cardiff are very sort of. It used to be they were the only medical school in Wales. Now that Bangor's opened up, they're not. But
yeah.
they do ask sort of a geography kind of station where they're like, why Wales or why Cardiff? You know, that's almost always a feature that Cardiff have.
I think what's quite important about these questions is that you do need to know what kind of teaching style your medical school has, the pros and cons of that, how their anatomy sessions work. That's also quite important. There's slight variations in each university for that. You also want to know what clinical attachments you have, because something like Bangor, I believe, has mostly community-based medicine. There's not much hospital-based medicine, whereas Cardiff is. They'll ask you, for example, what you find fascinating about their program. What they would like to know that you at least know that information. You can find all of this on their, on basically if you search up the university's course details, you'll find everything about that. I researched the hospitals I would be in my clinical years. When am I starting actual clinical placement? Is it from first year? Is it later on? These kind of things you do want to look at and just understand the syllabus a bit. If you explain a little bit about the geography as well, like Sam said, some areas will have unique features. They might see certain cases more than others, and you might want to bring that up. And this is all on the university's website. So it's not like you can't prepare for it. And you can find that on there. So I do some research specifically for the 4 universities you're applying to and write those things down. Okay. But it's not essential you will necessarily be asked about this. Right, so Oxbridge interviews. So Sam, do you want to explain a little bit about what we might expect from an Oxbridge interview, if that's all right?
Yeah, so Oxbridge interviews are big panel interviews, and most of the time you'll be rotating between multiple colleges. So if you apply to, so I applied to St. John's College, Oxford. If you apply there, then you'll do some interviews there, and then they'll give you another college where you'll be interviewed there as well. Normally, it's a few different panel interviews. So I think Oxford used to. I'm a 5th year now, so I'm a little bit out of date. But they used to do more interviews, as in you'd have more sessions at Oxford than at Cambridge. But the main difference is the content. And the main difference with the content is science. They will push science that you have not yet learned at A level. It will be science that you're not expected to know. It's science that they are just looking, how do you approach this problem? How do you think about this problem? The main difference, as I say, is it's much harder to prepare for, and it's much more, they're not expecting you to necessarily get a perfect answer. They want you to feel a bit uncomfortable, and they want to see how you respond to the challenge more so than your average interview, which I can understand for most of you guys is going to be a challenge as well.
It can be literally anything. There are questions that tend to throw people off. What I would say for this is if you are enthusiastic about applying to Oxford or Cambridge, I personally didn't apply, but I didn't know Sam actually got an interview there. But if you do apply, it's worth doing some extra reading. I would definitely look into a bit about, Sam, would you suggest first year medical school? Just looking into a bit of, for example, basic anatomy.
So, I mean, I don't think it's not the kind of I probably wouldn't recommend that, to be 100% honest, just because they're not really expecting you. They're not expecting. I mean, if you know it all already, fantastic. But the thing they gave me, and I remember the thing that really annoyed me, it was a unmarked respiratory volume loop, which is a sort of, it's a graph that you get in medicine, that shows flow against volume. I'd never seen anything like it. And I remember it took me a long time to figure out what it could possibly be. And then they had all kinds of questions afterwards. Now, as a final year, if I'm being 100% honest, I think if you gave that question, a good portion of my final year, would struggle to answer all of the points, all of the ideas, because it's not designed to be 100% matched to any curriculum, including the medical school curriculum. It's designed to give you a challenge about how you thought. I remember another question, they had like a pond, and they asked me to measure out its surface area without using any instruments. And I thought, I mean, again, it's a very challenging question. They're very unique, and that one has nothing to do with medicine, for example. So I think the main thing is look at previous questions from YouTube and from our tutors. And then the other thing to do is try and approach the problem laterally. Take your time, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely look into practicing questions and at least make sure that you've got your biology and chemistry knowledge at your fingertips, because that will assist in certain questions. There are some questions, even like Sam said, even me and Sam would not know how to answer because they are quite complex. But again, it's about your problem solving skills, about your confidence as well. If you can appear confident, you can ask them questions, you can sort of give your line of thinking, then you should be fine. Right, so we're going to another station, but this time I'm going to be the student. Sam's going to ask me the question. this is a typical role play scenario. So, Sam, I think you're gonna have to do some acting.
No.
And it doesn't always have to be medically related with these ones. They can be just general role play scenarios. They're just trying to see how you are as a person in general. But these ones, just practice as much as you can. Get familiar with the GMC guidelines. Look at how you're expected to respond in certain situations. So for this one, it's more of your personality as well. So to a certain extent, you can prepare, but it's also personality-based assessment as well. So Sam, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. You are a final year medical student working in A&E. Your colleague Deji is feeling stressed out with his work. He has lost motivation for medicine and he is tired of the negatives of the job. Please speak to him about his concerns, address any negatives that he mentions, and try to emphasize the positives of his job as a doctor.
Okay,
Okay.
so we'll start. Hi, Deji. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. How are you doing, Ashir?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Yeah, I heard that you were feeling a bit stressed out, so I just thought I'd come and check up on you. How's everything?
Yeah, no, I mean, this A&E placement is it's really wearing me down. We had to do those, the night on calls that we had to do as part of our sort of med school portfolio. And I watched all the other doctors. They all seemed miserable, and it was a really busy night, and I just ended up leaving feeling that I hadn't really helped anyone, and
Hmm.
it was just overwhelming. Not gonna lie, Usher.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Deji. I've heard A&E is quite tough. Yeah. And how are you doing otherwise? I can see that's probably stressed you out quite a bit. How are you doing outside of med school?
Outside of med school, I mean, I think that's another problem, to be honest. I feel like, in the early years, first, second year, I had plenty of time to pursue the things I enjoyed. But now I just feel like every time, the only times I get home, I just want to sleep. And then the only times where I have a bit of energy at home, I need to revise. And yeah, I feel I don't have any time anymore for the things I enjoy.
Yeah, it's quite tough to be honest, final year, and I can understand. And it's interesting. You said you felt like you didn't help much doing A&E, but from what I understand, it's quite hard even as a medical student to contribute because there's not much we
Mm.
can do, right?
No, there's not. I mean, yeah, no. One of the things I saw was a gentleman who come in with, he'd broken his leg, and he was there for a while because all the other doctors were busy, and he kept asking me if I could prescribe some morphine, and I was like, I can't. I can't prescribe. I'm a medical student, and I don't think he quite understood that, and he was just in pain.
Yeah, and that's quite hard to see somebody in pain and you can't help them, especially because we're almost doctors now as well. So, you know, it's quite. What did you do there then, just out of interest?
Well, I mean, I went to the doctor and I asked, hey, we got a chap in the next cubicle who's in real pain. Can you prescribe? And the doctor's like, of course I can. Just give me a moment. But then the moment turned into 5 minutes, into half an hour, because their patient was having problems. I think they had to call the crash team or something like that. Not entirely sure what happened with them, but it was quite some time, and the doctor seemed quite sort of well, quite down themselves, a bit angry actually because of whatever happened with them. And I felt like I was sort of intruding a bit.
Yeah, it's quite. But you were looking out for the patient there, weren't you? And I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
You did, to be honest, from your perspective, you did everything you could, and I think you did a pretty good job of it. Um,
Thank you.
but with the doctors, I mean, it's just a huge NHS issue at the minute that A&E's bombarded, and they're quite busy. They can't look after patients properly as they should be able to because of the sheer amount of pressure that they have. I feel like you did everything you could have, did you, to be honest?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, but I just sometimes feel like everything I can do is not enough. And as you say, I think it's partly the NHS. I know that I did what I should have done in that situation. It's just, it's still, I just didn't like seeing the person that I was meant to be helping in pain for half an hour. I really didn't like it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing me as well. I know that these kind of things are hard to talk about as well, Deji. So as a colleague and a friend, and as a friend, I really appreciate, that you shared that with me. And I think as doctors, especially going into junior, sort of when we become junior doctors as well, there's also a lot of things that we still can't do at that stage. We still need to check with our seniors, right? So I
Mm.
mean, the only concern I have, to be honest, is that it's just how it's affecting you. How do you feel about medicine in general?
I think if this was just a one-off, I wouldn't be too upset by it. Everyone has a rough night every now and then, but I feel like this is, I talk to doctors, they all complain of the same thing. And I just feel every time I've been in A&E for the last few weeks on our placement, it's been the same story. And I just feel like I don't know if I want to do this anymore, you know?
Oh, that's quite tough. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything in medicine at the moment that you do like other than A&E?
Yeah, no, no, I guess there are some things, you're right. Maybe it's this placement in particular that's been getting to me. I do quite enjoy, going into the theatres every now and then. Quite like some of the trauma theatres. There's some friendly surgeons in there.
Oh, that's good. Because one thing, I mean, we all have to do this, don't we? When we're like
Mm,
juniors, we have to rotate everywhere and just learn everything. So there's always going to
mm.
be positives and negatives to things, right?
Yeah,
I
true.
mean, I feel like it's a learning experience as well. Is there anything valuable that you learned from A&E, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing I've definitely learned is that, the NHS, we need a lot more help, and we definitely need more feet on the ground and more money as well. I mean, there's resource, we've lost our resources, and I think the other thing I learned is, yeah, I guess you're right. You just got to do your best you can and try not to let it get to you too much. I think I've also learned that A&E is probably not for me.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has their strengths, right? And you'll enjoy
Hmm.
different things. The only thing other than that you was I'm worried about is that you said you're not finding the time to sort of do the things that you enjoy doing. You're just going home and sleeping. Um,
Yeah.
is that because you just do you want any help with that? Is there anything I can help with?
Well, that's kind of you to offer. I don't know. I think I need to try and maybe take a step back, maybe try and remember. I think I just sort of lost track of the fact. I think it is partly the A&E placement. You're right, but I think it's probably also I need to take a moment to, relax a bit more when I get home. Try and save a bit of energy for when I get home, so I can do something I enjoy. I used to enjoy running with the run club.
Yeah.
Um, maybe I should get back into that.
Yeah, I think for me as a colleague and as a friend, the number one thing for me is just your health in general as well. I don't want this weighing down on you too much too. So just remember to
Mm,
keep a little bit of a breath as well. Like if it's too much for you, I mean, we have the med school to speak to you as well. I mean, as a colleague, I feel like you're a very good medical student as well. You're going in, you're helping your patients as much as you can. There's always going to be negatives of a certain job, and we all know this. But I think the positives are if there are like surgery that you look forward to, then we'll eventually get there as well. But yeah,
mm.
I think we'll stop there if that's fine. With these ones, you can go on, and it's you just have to show that you've got good sort of empathy here. I think number one thing for the interviewers is they're looking for somebody who's good at communication, can show empathy. You're not supposed to sort of in this question, you're not supposed to make Deji feel like he needs to continue with medicine necessarily. It's about showing support. It's about reminding him of the positives in a subtle way. How do you feel that went, Sam?
Yeah, no, I mean, so let's think what Ashir did. So first of all, he was very polite, started as quite an average conversation, realized that there was a bit of a problem going on. And first of all, did quite in-depth questions about all kinds of different things, about what had happened. He asked about my experience, and he asked about my life outside of the medical school, the medical environment. Remember, they love holisticness, these interviewers. They love the idea of taking care of lots of different aspects, not just of your patients, but of your colleagues as well. So she did a really good job there, checking in on me, checking that my life was okay, not just inside my work environment, but also outside of my work environment. He talked slowly, he matched my tone, he matched my sort of my thought process, and yeah, there was no points. I mean, the main things, as Ashir said, that they're looking for here. You might get into an odd pocket or two where you feel you're not getting anywhere. It might feel that they might say stop now, and it might feel a bit awkward leaving it, but you don't necessarily need to finish as a perfect conversation because ultimately this is a role play. It's not real life, and it's going to be a bit odd. You just need to show that you're empathetic, that you've got good communication skills, and that you found out the important points that they want you to get.
Yeah, perfect. So I think to be honest, that's pretty much it with role plays. You need to practice these as much as possible. And number one thing is be holistic, like Sam said. So don't just ask about how Deji's doing at med school, also ask about his life in general. How is he doing? These things are quite important. So I think these are pretty much all the points that you could go on for these quite a bit. Anyways, let's move on to we'll leave this one out just because of time purposes. Sam, are you okay to go on for an extra 5 minutes just to get through the
Yeah,
Q&A with the students?
yeah, of course.
So what resources should I use? When I was preparing Sam, I'm not sure about you, I had this sort of small green textbook, the ICS, I think that's what it's called, or it had like a green stethoscope on it. I purely used that because there was not much at that time. Um,
Oh,
and I practice with a lot of friends and family. Uh, Now, in terms of resources, there is one really good one that I always recommend for everyone when it comes to interview practice is the GMC guidelines. So you can search up that good medical practice book. You don't need to memorize everything, but get a good understanding of what's expected of you. There is something called Gibbs reflective cycle. Sam, have you heard of that before?
yes.
Great. So I always recommend this to students, and I feel like not everybody knows about this. I'm just going to really quickly share my screen here to something else, but this is really, really good for help with structuring your answers. Now, bear in mind, you do not need to answer every one of these questions. This is just a guide into what makes a good answer, especially when it comes to reflection. So, when you get your personality questions, your work experience ones, and your motivation for medicine, try and use this framework. This framework is really, really good to use, and you do not need to include every single thing here. But I think you should use this. These are good examples of resources that are just out there. Obviously, if you are looking for a bit further help, you need some assistance from someone like Sam or myself. I don't teach as much anymore, but so Sam does a brilliant job of that. He's been teaching lots of our students, and we have lots of tutors like Sam who are quite well experienced, and you can get some support from them if you'd like. Now, if you are interested in something like that, we are offering 50% off your first lesson. So you can scan that QR code there if you want. Sam, are there any other resources that you can think of for the students that they can just access?
I think the big one is that we haven't mentioned so far is YouTube. There are loads of good YouTube videos of all kinds of different stations, all kinds of different people doing different stations. Again, I think there's lots of different ways of revising this. And I think, as Ashir said, use your family, use your friends, even if they're not medics. They'll be able to say, "Oh, you sound quite confident," "Oh, you're talking too slow," "Oh, I don't understand what you mean here." They may not be able to help you on the medical content. We can help you more with that, but they will definitely be able to tell you this aren't you sound, you sound like you're coming across well, you sound like an intelligent person I would want to accept to my university. So I think, yeah, Nashir has already mentioned a good number of resources. I think the main two that I would add to after that would just be use your family and friends more than you think, the more the better. And there's lots of good videos on YouTube of all kinds of different questions.
Brilliant. Yeah, YouTube has endless resources that you can look at. There were some nice videos uploaded by the University of Leeds with example MMIs. Not sure if they're still up. I used that back in the day, but yeah, I mean, exactly what Sam said. Somebody's asked me what was my group exercise for hymns. This was a while back, Ryan. I honestly don't even remember. But on in the basis of group exercises, when you do get them at some universities, they are basically as a way to see how you would interact as a group, and they're not looking for any specific knowledge. I think it's quite a generic exercise that they give to you, and the only way that you can really prepare for this, actually, there is only one way that you can prepare for it is actually just reading up on how you would collaborate as a team. If you have done work experience and you've attended ward rounds, for example, which very few of you might have done, you'll be able to see how they communicate with each other, how they sort of pass on and give debriefs about different patients. You can use different tricks with this. Now, what you want to do in a group exercise is not talk too much or talk too little, and try and contribute. Well, try and invite everybody into the discussion. So what I did, from what I vaguely remember, there was about a few of us in there, and we were discussing a certain topic, which I don't remember at all, but we were discussing sort of the pros and cons of certain things. And what I did was I talked maybe twice or two or three times, but every time I did, I always acknowledged the previous person's points and explained that I thought they were quite interesting, and then talked about mine. And then I invited somebody else into the discussion who I noticed wasn't talking as much. So these are the main points you want to do in a group exercise. Anyways, we'll move on to the next bit. I'm just going to give you guys just about a couple of minutes if you want. If you're happy with today and you really liked it, this does go into, we do spend a lot of time sort of designing these webinars, and Sam does a lot of preparation. It does help if you leave us some feedback, if that's all right. So if you can scan that QR code, and if you have left some feedback, just say yes in the group chat or something. We are giving one student today an MMI circuit for free. So we'll just go back at the chat and see who's left a comment to say that they left a feedback or just yes, and we'll just email you afterwards. We'll move on to the Q&A really quickly, if that's fine. There has been a lot of questions, quite some interesting ones, which I've forgotten about. But we'll do the Q&A for about 5 minutes, if that's all right. Sam, what we'll do is I'll answer one question and you answer one. Is that all right?
Sure.
Some generic ones that we've been asked about before is, well, where's the recording? It's on YouTube. So if you search up our YouTube channel, you will find it over there. And also, we will send you an email anyways, so you will definitely find the recording. Don't worry about that. Right. So there's still some people saying yes, but I'll just go off the top of the list, Sam. I've got some interesting questions here. Some person has said, what do we do if we don't finish in the time given? We just stare at them and wait until the time finishes.
So as in you finished too early, or you're talking until
I think what they mean is they finish too early
they
and they've
finished
got
too
like a bit.
early. So in Birmingham we have sort of two as when we examine you guys, we have two levels of sort of stimulus. We have what's called a nudge and we have what's called a prompt. A nudge is when you've made some good points and we're like we've got a minute or two left. Please keep talking. We'll say, do you have any more ideas to add to your answers, or do you have anything else you want to add? And that's a good sign that we want you to keep talking. I tend to say for most people, if you've got 30 seconds or less at the end of your station and you've finished, that's normally fine. A prompt is when we think either you haven't given any good ideas or you're way under time. We might say something, have you considered this? Or have you thought about that? And that's really bad. We don't want that because that normally means we're marking you down because you haven't come up with some good ideas yourself. But good question, yes.
Good question, yeah. Try and the only thing I would look at is because you can find some information about the MMIs for each university, like how long each station is going to be, what topics they like to look at, what qualities they're looking for in a student. UCL has that on their website. Some of the universities do as well. So have a look at that and just kind of get a general idea. That's how you want to think of your content and practice according to that as well. But what Sam said is quite valid. They do tend to ask further questions if they feel like you're missing something out. In one of my OSCEs, Sam, it was a respiratory one back in year 4. I was asked questions on, follow-up questions on certain differential diagnoses that I missed out. So I knew I was doing bad. I think the same thing applies with some MMIs as well. So yeah, definitely try and make sure that you cover as much as you want. Don't panic as well. If you get asked further questions like that, stay confident. Somebody asked a question earlier, can I take 30 seconds just to think about the answer? You do get reading time at the start before you even go into the station most of the time. But for example, in a panel, if you're suddenly asked a question, you can take a few seconds, like 10, 15 seconds to just say, let me just gather my thoughts if that's all right, please. And they'll be happy with that. Try not to panic. The first time I did my interview at Plymouth, I panicked. I just went, I didn't even say, I'm going to take 30 seconds to just think about the answer to that. And I started sweating slightly, and that's when they notice you're not really confident. I did get that in my feedback. So yeah, I think any more questions, guys? I'm just scrolling up to see who else has asked questions. But if you've got any further ones, please leave them in the chat.
We've got a few questions about Oxbridge stuff. So, I mean, how do you tackle scientific questions you don't have knowledge on? The answer is they're not expecting you to get it right, guys. They're not expecting you to know science that, as I say, me and Ashir would potentially struggle with, or that we've only learned in the last year or two. They're not necessarily expecting you to get everything right. They want you to walk away feeling uncertain and unconfident. They're more interested in how you approach a question and your academic thought. It's quite unusual because you guys are all at school. You're used to getting, very high grades, getting answers right. They're not. This is designed to not be something you can really get right. A very small number of people will get it right, but that's not really what it's designed for. It's more designed so they can see how you approach the problem.
I think that goes for most courses at Oxford and Cambridge. We do help students with other courses as well, and they tend to ask quite specific questions, and it is quite harsh. But again, they're looking at your problem-solving skills rather than if you know everything about a certain problem. You can definitely. I think this question over here is quite interesting. So any lab work experience that you've done, yes, definitely. You can talk about the teamwork aspect. Generally, when you're doing lab work, you aren't working by yourself. You could talk about the competence that you need as a doctor and why that's important. You can also talk about time management and organizational skills because you do have to stick to certain deadlines for your lab work. You have to follow certain guidelines as well. So being sort of organized is important. Again, any of this can apply. Of course, practical work experience where you're in a hospital simulates that clinical environment, but medicine is not just all about clinical practice. There are other aspects to it as well. So yes, you can definitely reflect on that.
When you get the offer for the interview, how much time do you usually have between the offer and actual interview day? Okay, so this depends where you are. Everywhere is slightly different, but most of the time there'll be some sort of link within the email which will take you to some sort of, it'll take you to like the portal for that particular university, and there'll be some sort of calendar system. So there'll be multiple slots, and you can book, similar to if you've done a driving test or driving theory, or for the UCAT actually. There'll be a calendar, you'll book a date. I recommend, if possible, to book about a month or maybe 2 months if you're feeling a bit unconfident space, because that's the time you want to spend cramming, really preparing, especially for that particular interview. The only thing I would say is when that interview offer comes through, do click that link and get it in the diary as soon as you can, because then you'll get a slot that you want. These slots fill up fast. You don't want to end up with one that's really close to your A levels or really close to, the time you're at now.
Perfect. I've never actually had to show this, the certificates for
No,
the.
me neither.
The thing is, one thing that's quite important is that because people assume you don't have to show evidence, I would not necessarily make up scenarios. I would not, say that I've done work experience when I haven't, because it's quite easy for interviewers to tell when you're not, when you haven't. Especially if they probe you on it as well. So you don't have to show certificates, you don't have to show the time that you spent. I think the important part to your answer is what have you learned from your work experience? How can you reflect on it? That's the important bits. So while even if you've done a few hours rather than like an entire month, that's not the important aspect. I think what we'll do, Sam, is just because we are a little short on time, there's just one more question I got from someone in the chat, and I thought this one was important. I've seen a few students miss out on interviews last year because they didn't keep an eye on their emails. You generally do get an email from the universities to select a date. So keep a very close eye on the email that you gave to UCAS and make sure you reply to that as soon as possible. Because there was one student that I remember, actually a couple of students last year who didn't keep an eye on their email and missed a couple of interviews just randomly. So that's quite an important one.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
And
I
I think
think,
as well,
yeah,
I think as well, guys, I would probably, to add to what Shir says, I would probably start checking that account more or less every day from now, because not only do you want to actually accept the offer, as the previous question suggested, you want to get a good slot, a slot that you have good preparation time for, but not too close to your A levels.
yeah. Great. So I think what we'll do is we'll end there. Thank you so much for today, Sam. We'll probably see the students next week. Next week, we shouldn't have any issues with the joining stuff, by the way. I'm really sorry for that, guys. We had a meeting limit that I just had to remove in the first 5 minutes of the session. If any of you have missed that, you will all be sent the recording by email. It's also been uploaded to our YouTube channel. But yeah, thank you so much for today, Sam. And thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashir. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Yeah. See you guys next week. Bye now.